can we stop with the war on carbs, please? Carbohydrates. First of all, before I go into any of this, if you're someone with a medical condition where you have a hard time processing carbohydrates, I'm not talking about you. Like, you got to do what's right for, your health and your medical status. Like, this is not about that. This is about sort of just this general consensus. And what's often pointed to is that this is very paralleled to how there was sort of a war on fat in the 80s and 90s. There's this general sort of societal thing, it seems, where people just believe that carbohydrates are just inherently bad in some way and should be cut out of diet. This is not good advice. And ironically, at least ironically in my point of view, a lot of the people who seem to push this, people who want to do keto or whatever, again, not from a medical perspective, just from you can handle carbs fine, but choose not to and think that they're bad in some way. It's ironic because a lot of the people pushing this message forward seem to be people who care about their nutrition, often have some sort of athletic activity in their life. And those are the types of people who probably would benefit from carbohydrates the most. So let me back up and talk for a second about macronutrients. So if you're unfamiliar, macronutrients, there are three main ones and a fourth. The three main ones are what you would see in the back of a nutrition label. You have fats, carbs, and protein. The fourth is alcohol, which we'll talk about in a second. But let's just talk about the main three. Of those three, two of them are considered required, or are required. I shouldn't say are considered required. Two of them are a necessity. You need proteins and fats. Carbohydrates are more optional, I suppose. If you don't have carbs, if you had, very few or zero carbs throughout the course of a day, week, month, but you were getting plenty of protein and fat, your body wouldn't shut down. Whereas if you go for too prolonged of a period of time without fats or protein, at some point you will die. So it's a non-essential macronutrient, but it is still a macronutrient. I think, well, first of all, and that's where sort of like a keto diet can function, right? Because if you tried to do keto, but instead of cutting carbs out, you cut out like protein or something, that wouldn't work. So in theory, you can have, or not even in theory, in practice, you can have a diet that cuts out carbs, and it's fine. That doesn't mean it's better for you. And if your body is fine at processing carbohydrates, there are a lot of benefits to making sure that they are a staple in your diet and in your nutrition plan. I'll talk about my experience for a second first here. So for years now, I've been doing sort of bulking and cutting cycles. When I first went to kind of correct my nutrition years ago and put it on a better path, there were certain things that I started to reduce and really pay attention to if they were on the back of a nutrition label. I would look for things that were as high in protein as possible, with as little, in particular, added sugar as possible, and with low fats in proportion to protein. So that meant that a lot of what I was eating was lean meats, and it cut certain things out of my diet, like I didn't, eat a lot of cereals and stuff, because there tends to be a lot of added sugar there. And sort of in that process, not entirely intentionally, just by doing that, by cutting, down on sugar and fats, what happened to me was that I really did end up in a fairly low carb diet. Not keto low, right? But just lower than I could be having, right? And what I found eventually after tracking some nutrition stuff was that I was definitely way over on protein most of the time. Like I was having way more protein than necessary. And my carbs were really the thing that were pretty low on any given day. So you can talk about this from a few different perspectives, right? I'll talk about sort of weightlifting, bodybuilding sort of stuff. There is some wisdom, I think, particularly toward the end of a hard cut, if you're trying to cut weight, where reducing carbs makes sense and increasing your protein to like kind of crazy high degrees. Protein is the hardest macronutrient for your body to convert into fat cells. Fat is the easiest and carbs are somewhere in the middle. So when you're cutting weight, it makes sense to kind of cut back on the non-essential macronutrient and really ramp up the one that will be very difficult for your body to turn into fat, protein. And that's where you end up with these crazy diets that are like, 8 ounces of chicken and broccoli, and that's it, right? With a little bit of olive oil. So you're getting kind of your essential fats, and it's almost all protein. And then your body in those cases is forced to kind of use that extra protein for energy as opposed to using, carbohydrates or whatever else. So there's some wisdom in that. However, if you are in sort of a maintenance phase or, and I would argue, a bulking phase, the thing to really ramp up, so let's talk about bulking for a second. If you're going to add a bunch of weight, the way you're going to get the best results in the gym is by adding a bunch of carbs into your diet. Because there's a couple reasons. One piece is that adding any additional protein past a certain point, your body's not going to do much with that in a surplus. Having 300 grams of protein compared to 200 grams of protein while you're on a bulk isn't really going to do much for you. What will do a lot for you is if you have the energy in the gym to push yourself as hard as physically and mentally possible. And what's going to help give you that kind of explosive athletic energy is going to be some carbs, some extra carbs in your diet. Carbohydrates are an excellent source of of expendable energy. So having those in your body is a really good idea if you're trying to bulk efficiently, because you can burn that for energy. It will spare your body from trying to convert a bunch of protein into that energy. It'll be way more efficient. You will feel way better. And if you keep up with it day after day after day, your energy level will be much higher in general. So if you are bulking or even maintaining your body weight, filling in some of that extra calorie, a good chunk of those extra calories compared to cutting with carbs, is going to make you feel and perform better. The other thing that carbs do, and this is, I think, part of where they get a bad rap, if you cut carbs out of your diet, you're going to lose a bunch of weight. That's true. But it's not fat. It's because carbs store a certain amount of water. So if you have carbs floating around in your body, they are storing a certain amount of water, which kind of indirectly helps you stay hydrated and helps keep some extra water in things like your muscles, for instance. All of which, again, is great for training, great for weightlifting, great for whatever other types of training you might be doing. Again, if you're trying to cut fat, there is some argument to be made where if you reduce your carbs and if you can still keep your physical level of activity high, you'll probably burn some fat more efficiently because your body will need to use some of that stored energy essentially from fat in your body to fuel that training. But if you're not trying to cut weight and you're just walking around, you're going to feel and perform, again, much better and be generally a bit more hydrated. And yeah, you might weigh a little extra, but that's not fat. And when most people talk about weight loss, what they really want is fat loss. And quickly, the reason I think some of these crash, no carb diets seem so great on the surface is because you follow it for a week or two and it's like, oh my God, I just dropped, 10, 15 pounds. Yeah, in water, mostly. And glycogen. So again, the main couple things I wanted to mention here, the things that I've bumped into, and the things that I have been doing in my training and my workout and my nutrition, is I have been intentionally, sometimes, because for years, if I was going for that extra snack for the day, I might go grab, maybe I've already had 180, 200 grams of protein. I might, in past years, go and snack on more yogurt or chicken or like something that's high protein that then would push me up into like the 250 range. But I would get into some of my workouts and I just noticed over the years, like, man, I'm bulking, but my energy level is not where I feel it should be on a bulk. And after I experimenting a little bit more and tracking some things and realizing that my carbs were just too low, intentionally working more carbs into my diet. And again, not just a bunch of sugar, but like decent carbs. Energy level, way better. Performance, way better. Day to day, hour to hour feeling, way more energetic. And in terms of like leanness and physical appearance, no issues. Just to close out here, I just did the smallest little bit of research because the two big things that I had bumped into along the way were A, carbs hold water and therefore are sort of an indirect form of helping keep someone hydrated. And B, carbs obviously being a great source of expendable energy for training purposes and athletic purposes, stuff like that. But I did a quick look just to see what other benefits of carbohydrates really are around. And I'm just going to rattle a couple of these off just to kind of reinforce the point that there's some great stuff here. And if you're just cutting carbs because like you think that's better for weight loss or something, or better in general, I would do a little more research and take a look at this. So here's just a couple things that I came across. Again, for the athletes, enhanced recovery. Carbs are great for helping you recover, especially like if you think about it, if you're weightlifting and breaking your body down all the time, increasing your carb intake will help you recover faster and better. Better brain function. The brain is fueled largely on things that come from carbs. So better cognitive ability, better focus. Protein sparing. Now, this is something that I mentioned a little bit in this episode, but if all you're doing is eating protein and fat, your body needs to use those things for energy. So it will actually use some of the protein you're taking in to help build muscle, and instead it will reroute that to using it for energy. So if you're supposed to be taking in, say, 180 grams of protein, and you take in 180 grams of protein, but you don't have enough carbs in your body for the energy it needs, that means that your body's going to use some of that 180 grams of protein for things that you're not intending it to be used for. By increasing your carbohydrates, your body will use that for energy instead, and your protein can actually be used for what protein is good at, which is helping to synthesize, muscle, essentially. And finally, again, unless there are abnormalities, carbs are very good for helping to balance hormones across your body, which again helps for things like training and focus and day-to-day feeling good and so on and so forth. And I believe there are many others. Those were just the ones that I kind of stumbled upon kind of easily. So if this sounds at all familiar, I would really suggest taking a look at what your level of carbohydrates are. Do try to avoid a bunch of things that on the label say added sugar. But outside of that, try to take in some more carbs if you're feeling a little low on energy. if you're feeling a little low on focus, if in the gym you're not quite there and you think you should be able to do more. This war on carbs needs to stop. It's very irrational. And there are so many benefits to trying to take in more. Just in my kind of somewhat short time of trying to amp this up, I've noticed tremendous improvements. And, I would challenge anyone to really take the research and find truly compelling reasons that carbs should be so low on the totem pole.